I'm not sure how to start this. I guess I should just dive into it. My name's Jake, and I'm a 35-year-old software developer living in Orlando, Florida. I had been married to Melissa for 8 years, and honestly, I thought we were doing great. We met in college and built a life together that included our two wonderful kids, but over the past few months, things just felt off. It started with small things. Melissa would come home late from work, claiming she was caught up with a project, something about hosting a big charity event at the theme park where she worked. I took it at face value. Her job was demanding and she was excited about the event. But then she started changing her routines. She stopped asking me to join her for dinner, often opting to grab takeout on her way home. And the way she'd constantly check her phone, texting and giggling made my gut sink. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe she was just planning surprises for me or the kids, but deep down I felt something was brewing. One afternoon, I decided to pick up the kids early from school. I thought I'd surprise Melissa with a nice dinner or something. I remember the kids were chattering in the backseat and I was feeling good. But as I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was already there. Weird, I thought. Melissa should still be at work. I walked in, kids in tow. The house was quiet, too quiet. I called out for her, but there was no response. That's when I noticed her phone on the coffee table, face up. I might not have been the snooping type before, but my instincts kicked in. I picked it up and saw a message pop up from someone named Tommy. My heart raced as I opened it. "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. I'll meet you at the usual spot after your shift." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there frozen while the kids ran around, oblivious to what was happening. I felt sick. How could she? I glanced around the room, and that's when I saw her work ID and a flyer for the theme park on the wall. Everything started to click into place. I waited silently for her to come home, my mind racing with thoughts. The kids were still laughing and playing, but I was consumed by this dark cloud of betrayal. When Melissa walked through the door, her smile faltered the moment she saw me standing there with her phone in my hand. "Jake, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice turning defensive. I held up the phone, the screen lighting up with the message still visible. "Who's Tommy?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Melissa's face transformed from confusion to panic. "Oh, that's just a coworker. We were planning a work outing." She stammered, but the way she avoided eye contact told me everything I needed to know. I confronted her, and the excuses started pouring out. She claimed it was nothing, that she was just trying to avoid a boring night at home with me, that I was too busy with work to notice her struggles. Each lie made my blood boil more. I was hurt, angry, and disgusted all at once. It felt like every moment I had built my life around was crumbling in front of me. As I listened to her excuses, I felt this overwhelming sense of betrayal and sadness washed over me like a tidal wave. I wanted to scream, to throw things, but instead I just stood there numb. How could she do this to me, to our family? I knew I had to make a choice, and I couldn't make it just yet. I needed time to think. I watched her transform from the woman I thought I knew to someone I didn't recognize at all. So that was the start of my journey. I was ready to take action, but what would it be? After that confrontation, everything spiraled. I sent the kids to their rooms, saying I needed some time to talk to their mom. I really didn't know what I was doing. I just felt like I was in a haze, like I was watching my life unfold in front of me from a distance. Melissa kept trying to touch my arm to reassure me, but I recoiled. The trust between us had shattered, and she was still up there spinning her web of lies. "Jake, please, you're overreacting," she urged, but I could hear the desperation in her voice. "You know I love you. We've been through so much together. You think love is just a word. You've been lying to me. How can you say you love me when you're texting another guy?" I shot back. Her face flushed, and I could see the gears turning in her head, desperately searching for a way to spin this. "Tommy is just a friend. You know how I get along with everyone at work. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything." The disbelief bubbled up inside me. "You're meeting him at night, and I find you texting this guy while I'm here thinking everything is fine. You don't even know how to respond to the truth anymore, do you?" I could see the panic set in. The tears brimmed in her eyes, but they felt so insincere. I'd seen that face before when she wanted something, when she was trying to win an argument. But this wasn't some silly quarrel. This was about our marriage, our kids, and our lives. As I sat there watching her squirm, I felt this strange calm wash over me. A sudden realization hit me. I wasn't going to be a passive participant in my own life. I was done being the nice guy who just rolled over whenever things got tough. This was a betrayal that I couldn't accept, and I needed to do something about it. After our heated confrontation, I spent the next few days in turmoil. I kept replaying the whole scene in my head, trying to piece together how we got here. I observed her closely, looking for signs of guilt, but she was remarkably good at putting on a facade. She'd be all smiles, laughing with the kids, but I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of anxiety whenever I walked into the room. That's when I started considering my options. My first instinct was to confront Tommy, the theme park employee she was cheating with, but I wanted to be strategic about this. I couldn't just confront him and make a scene. I had to hit them where it hurt. I began doing some digging, researching what I could about him. It turned out Tommy was a ride operator at the park, and he'd been there for a couple of years. I learned that he had a reputation among the staff, a notorious flirt who often crossed the line with women, but I also discovered he had a history of complaints filed against him. This was my leverage. The more I learned, the more the plan formed in my mind. I couldn't just let this go. I needed revenge, not just for myself, but to send a clear message to Melissa that her actions had consequences. I started formulating a strategy that would ruin Tommy's job and make sure Melissa faced the fallout of her choices. One evening, as Melissa sat absorbed in her phone, I casually asked her about her work. "So how's Tommy doing? Heard he's quite the charmer," I said with a lightness that belied the anger simmering beneath. She froze, her eyes darting to mine. "What do you mean?" The defensive tone was back, and I relished it. "Oh, just that I heard he's been getting really friendly with the new hires," I said, feigning innocence. "Seems like he can't keep his hands to himself." She laughed nervously. "That's ridiculous, Jake. He's just a guy who likes to joke around." "Sure, sure," I replied casually, hiding my satisfaction at her discomfort. "I just think it's interesting how things can escalate when someone crosses boundaries." That night, I stayed up late plotting. I wanted to gather enough evidence against Tommy to ensure he'd get fired from the park. I knew for a fact that Melissa was in denial about her affair, and I was determined to wake her up to reality, even if it meant watching her world crumble. I felt empowered, a stark contrast to the helplessness I felt just days prior. I was no longer the victim of circumstances. I was taking charge, and I wouldn't look back. Now I just needed to execute my plan without raising any suspicions. The next few days were a blur of calculated planning and emotional turmoil. I had to be careful. I couldn't let Melissa suspect anything. I played the role of the devoted husband, acting like everything was normal. I took the kids out to the park, helped with homework, and even made dinner, all while plotting my next moves. My first step was to gather more evidence. I knew that I had to capture their interactions in a way that would be undeniable. I made it a point to follow Melissa one afternoon after she told me she was working late at the theme park. I felt like a detective in a cheesy movie, but my heart raced as I parked a discreet distance from the entrance. As I waited, I stewed in my frustration and disbelief. How could she do this to me? I had always been there for her, supporting her career, encouraging her dreams, and this was how she repaid me. I shook my head, pushing those thoughts aside as I focused on the task at hand. Around closing time, I finally saw her. She was walking out of the park with Tommy, laughing at something he said. My blood boiled as I watched them interact, his arm casually draped over her shoulder. I couldn't hear their words, but the way she looked at him made my stomach churn. There was a sparkle in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time, not directed at me anyway. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures from a distance. My heart raced with each click of the shutter. I knew these photos would be crucial evidence. I couldn't wait to show her what she was throwing away, what she was risking for a fling with a theme park employee. After they parted ways, I followed Tommy for a bit to see where he went. He drove to a nearby bar, and I made a mental note of the location. If I needed to confront him later, I wanted to make sure I had all my bases covered. That night, I showed the pictures to my best friend, Mark, who had been my confidant through all of this. He was furious on my behalf, a fiery ball of rage as he flipped through the images. "You're going to take him down, right? You can't let this slide." "Absolutely," I replied, my voice steely. "I want him gone. I want her to see the consequences of her actions." Mark offered to help. He suggested we gather more evidence, maybe talk to other employees at the park who might have seen them together. It was a great idea. The more people I could get on my side, the stronger my case would be. Over the next week, we gathered intel. I reached out to a few people in Melissa's department, pretending to be concerned about her well-being. I casually brought up Tommy, asking if they knew him. To my surprise, several coworkers echoed the same sentiment. He was known for being inappropriate with women. One even shared that there had been complaints filed against him, but nothing had ever been done. This was perfect. I was beginning to build a case, a solid foundation that would ensure Tommy's downfall. Armed with this information, I decided it was time to execute my plan. I created an anonymous email account and compiled everything I had: the photos, the messages, and the testimonies from her coworkers. I drafted a lengthy email addressed to the HR department at the theme park, detailing all of Tommy's inappropriate behavior, attaching all the evidence I had gathered. As I pressed send, a wave of adrenaline surged through me. I was about to turn their lives upside down. I wouldn't just be a passive observer of my own betrayal. I was taking control. But despite the rush, a nagging doubt began to creep in. Was this really the right thing to do? I wanted revenge, but at what cost? Was destroying Tommy's career going to fix my marriage? Or would it only deepen the rift between me and Melissa? I pushed those thoughts aside. I had to see this through. I needed her to understand the ramifications of her actions, to realize that there were consequences for betraying her family. The very next morning, I woke to a slew of frantic messages from Mark. "Dude, you won't believe this. Tommy got fired. The HR department received a ton of complaints about him. Apparently, they've been investigating him for weeks." My heart raced. The time for revenge was finally here, but as the reality of it sunk in, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and dread. Now, I needed to figure out how to confront Melissa. She would have to face the music, and I had to be ready for whatever fallout would come next. The news of Tommy's firing hit me like a freight train. Part of me felt exhilarated, like I'd just won a battle in a war I never wanted to fight. I had taken decisive action, and for the first time since discovering Melissa's affair, I felt like I was in control. But the other part of me was plagued by anxiety. What would this mean for my marriage? Would this push her deeper into denial or cause her to lash out? I waited until after dinner to confront her. The kids were already asleep, and the house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. As I sat on the couch, my heart raced. I rehearsed what I would say, but nothing could prepare me for the tidal wave of emotions that washed over me when she finally came into the living room. "Hey, babe, what's up?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes flickering with curiosity. I could see she was still riding that high of her day, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit her. "Melissa, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady. Her demeanor shifted instantly. "What about Tommy?" She froze, her smile fading. "What about him?" "About him getting fired," I said, watching her closely. I wanted to see her reaction, to peel back the layers of her facade. She played dumb for a moment, tilting her head. "What are you talking about?" I paused, letting the silence hang for a moment. "I'm talking about him being fired for sexual harassment. You know, the same guy you've been sneaking around with for weeks." Her eyes widened, a mixture of shock and disbelief washing over her face. "Jake, that's not true. What are you saying?" I leaned forward, my heart racing. "I sent an email to HR with evidence of your affair and his behavior. They acted on it. He's gone." I could see her world start to collapse. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But it was quickly swallowed up by the anger and hurt I had been holding onto for so long. "Are you serious?" she shouted, her voice rising in pitch. "You can't just ruin someone's life because of a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I roared back, my patience wearing thin. "You think this is just a misunderstanding? You've been cheating on me, Melissa. You think I'm going to stand by while you run off with another man?" Her expression shifted from anger to desperation. You don't understand. It was just a fling, something to cope with how distant we've become. You've been so busy with work I felt alone. Her words cut deep, but I fought back the urge to feel sorry for her. You think that gives you the right to betray me, to lie to our kids, to destroy everything we've built? I was trying to feel something. You can't even see how unhappy I've been. She cried, her voice trembling. You've been neglecting me for years. I took a deep breath, trying to process what she was saying. I had been focused on work, yes, but I was there for her and the kids in every other way. I couldn't accept her excuses. You don't get to shift the blame onto me. This is your choice, your responsibility, and now you're going to have to deal with the consequences. I watched as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Her face paled as she realized what losing Tommy meant, not just the affair but the implications of her actions. What will I do? He was my escape, she whispered, her voice barely audible. An escape? Really? I snapped back. You think running off with a guy half your age is a solution? You didn't even think about our family. I could see her breaking down, and part of me was glad. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences, that she couldn't just walk away from this unscathed. I'll fix this, she finally said, her voice breaking. I'll talk to HR. I'll explain that it was all a mistake, that we didn't mean for it to happen. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You think they'll just take your word for it? You think this is all going to disappear because you want it to? You're delusional. As tears streamed down her face, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a fracture in the family I had worked so hard to build. I longed for the days when we were happy, before the lies and betrayal had seeped into our lives like poison. I can't believe you do this, she whispered, her voice barely above a sigh. You're ruining everything. Everything was already ruined the moment you decided to cheat, I replied coldly. After that, we sat in silence, the weight of the moment heavy between us. I had taken my stand, and it felt both liberating and heartbreaking. I realized that this was just the beginning of the fallout. I had made my choice, and now I had to brace myself for the consequences. The days that followed the confrontation felt surreal. I had opened the floodgates, and the aftermath was a chaotic mix of emotions. Melissa and I were living in a house filled with tension, a fragile silence hanging between us like a thick fog. The kids were blissfully unaware, but I could see traces of strain in Melissa. She was quieter, withdrawn, and I felt the cracks forming in what was once a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. After a few days, I noticed Melissa attempting to reestablish some sense of normalcy. She cooked dinners, helped the kids with homework, and occasionally tried to engage me in small talk. But I was having none of it. I had awakened to the reality of our marriage, and the idea of sweeping everything under the rug felt impossible. I was still grappling with the emotional fallout of her betrayal. One night she came to me, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Jake, I'm really sorry. I don't know how we got here. I love you and I want to fix this," she said, her voice trembling. I could feel the conflict within me. Part of me wanted to believe her, to forgive her and move forward. But the other part screamed that trust was irreparably broken. "You can't just say you want to fix this. You've hurt our family, Melissa. It's not that simple." "I know," she replied, desperation in her voice. "I've made a terrible mistake and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. We can go to couples therapy. I'll cut all ties with Tommy. He's gone, Jake, I promise." Her words hung in the air, and I felt the weight of the decision sitting heavily on my chest. Part of me was tempted to give her another chance, to try to salvage what was left of our relationship. But every time I thought of her and Tommy, I felt that familiar surge of anger and betrayal. It was hard to reconcile her promises with the reality of her actions. "I do want to just sweep this under the rug and pretend everything's okay," I replied. "Trust takes time to rebuild, and right now, I don't know if I ever want to get there with you again." She fell silent, and I could see the realization that I was still hurt washed over her. She had been waiting for me to just forgive, to move on, as if this was just a bump in the road of our marriage. But for me, it was a monumental shift, one that shattered the foundation we had built together. The next few weeks turned into an emotional roller coaster. I continued to contemplate what to do next. I had dreams of a peaceful, happy marriage, and now it felt like I was stuck in a nightmare. I reached out to a therapist for myself, wanting to make sense of the mess my life had become. Talking to someone who wasn't emotionally invested helped, and I started to see things more clearly. Through therapy, I learned the importance of acknowledging my feelings, the anger, the pain, the betrayal. I realized that I needed to focus on myself and what I wanted moving forward, rather than dwelling on the past. I didn't have to rush into any decisions. I could take my time. As I began to focus on myself, I started making changes in my day-to-day life. I picked up hobbies I had neglected, like running and reading. I found comfort in the little things, the quiet moments with my children, the satisfaction of completing a project at work, and the joy of rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. And slowly I started to regain a sense of self that had been lost in the chaos. One evening, while I was sitting on the porch with a book, Melissa came out to join me. It was a rare moment of peace, and she looked different, more composed, calmer somehow. "Can I sit with you?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. I nodded, and we sat in silence for a while. The stars were bright against the night sky, and it felt oddly comforting. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she finally said, breaking the silence. "This experience has shown me how much I need to change, not just for you, but for myself." I caw. "Go on like this. Change doesn't happen overnight, Melissa," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "You have to be willing to put in the work." "I will," she insisted. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back, but I understand if you're not ready to forgive me." Her sincerity struck a chord within me, but I still wasn't sure. Forgiveness felt like a distant concept, but I appreciated that she was acknowledging her mistakes. "It's going to take time," I said. "There's a lot of damage to repair, and I can't promise anything right now." "I understand," she said quietly, "but I hope we can figure this out together." In that moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I fell in love with, the one who had gotten lost along the way. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward for us, a path that would require effort, patience, and a lot of hard conversations. As the weeks turned into months, I started to contemplate what I truly wanted. Did I want to try and make this work? Or was it time to let go? I didn't have all the answers, but I was beginning to accept that I could choose my own path, regardless of what happened with Melissa. Now, it was time to make the hardest decision of all. What did I truly want for my future? As the days turned into weeks, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I had slowly begun to navigate the emotional wreckage of my marriage, and while Melissa had shown signs of genuine remorse, I was still torn between the love I once felt for her and the anger stemming from her betrayal. Each day was a struggle, and I spent countless nights lying awake, wrestling with my thoughts. I knew I had to make a decision, and the clock was ticking. The kids were getting older, and I wanted to create a stable environment for them. I didn't want them to see their parents in a constant state of conflict, but I also didn't want them to grow up thinking it was okay to tolerate betrayal. I sought advice from my therapist and friends, some of whom had gone through similar experiences. Each one encouraged me to prioritize my happiness and well-being, but the hardest part was accepting that sometimes love isn't enough to hold a relationship together. One evening, I decided to call Mark over. I needed someone who could help me sort through my feelings. As we sat in the living room, beer in hand, I laid everything bare. "I just don't know what to do anymore, Mark. I feel like I'm stuck in limbo. I want to believe she's changed, but I can't shake the memories of what she did." Mark nodded, listening intently. "You're not obligated to forgive her, Jake. It's about what you want. You deserve happiness, too. If you think there's a chance to rebuild, then maybe give it a shot. But if you're feeling more resentment than love, that's something to consider, too." His words hit home. I had spent so much time focused on what Melissa wanted, on her attempts to redeem herself, that I hadn't truly thought about my own needs. I needed to step back and assess whether I could envision a future with her, or if it was time to let go and prioritize my own happiness. That night, after Mark left, I decided to take a walk. I strolled through our neighborhood, the cool night air filling my lungs as I took in the familiar sights. I passed the park where I used to take the kids, the ice cream shop where Melissa and I shared countless laughs, and the restaurant where we had celebrated our anniversary. Each place held memories, but they also bore the weight of our struggles. By the time I returned home, clarity washed over me. I understood that I had to be honest with myself and with Melissa. The following day, I asked her to meet me in the living room after the kids went to bed. My heart raced as I anticipated the conversation that was about to unfold. As we sat across from each other, I could see the anxiety etched on her face. "Jake, please don't tell me you're going to end this," she said, her voice shaky. "I need to be honest with you, Melissa," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what happened and where we go from here." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know I messed up. And I'm sorry. I want to fix this. I'm willing to do anything. I believe you when you say that, but I have to be honest about my feelings too. I've spent so long trying to figure out if we can get back to what we had, but every time I look at you, I'm reminded of the betrayal," I said, my voice steady but pained. "I can't ignore that." Her expression fell, and I could see the realization hit her. "So, what are you saying? You want a divorce?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I think we need to separate," I said, feeling a heavy weight lift off my chest as I spoke the words. "I don't want this to be an ugly battle, but I can't see us making it work right now. I need to find my own way, and I think you do too." She broke down, sobbing as she clutched her hands to her chest. "I can't believe this is happening. I thought we could work through it together. Maybe one day we can be friends, co-parents who support each other," I said, my heart aching for her. "But right now, I think we both need space to heal. We can't keep going in circles." It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had, but it felt necessary. The relief that washed over me was palpable. I had finally taken a stand for myself, choosing to prioritize my own happiness and mental well-being. The following weeks were filled with logistics, figuring out living arrangements, child custody, and how to communicate moving forward. It was messy and emotional, but I felt a sense of strength I hadn't experienced in a long time. Over time, I found a rhythm. I started focusing on fostering a positive environment for the kids, ensuring they felt loved and supported. Melissa and I settled into a co-parenting dynamic, and while it was still awkward at times, we both managed to navigate our new reality with respect. Looking back, I realized that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It can become a catalyst for growth and change. I learned valuable lessons about self-worth, the importance of honesty, and recognizing when to walk away. If there's one piece of advice I can offer to anyone in a similar situation, it's to prioritize your own happiness and well-being. It's okay to put yourself first, to demand respect in your relationships, and to know when it's time to let go. Life is too short to settle for anything less than the love and joy you truly deserve. And so, I moved forward, ready to embrace whatever life had in store for me next. I felt free, empowered, and ready for a fresh start.